The Catcher Within the Rye is set across the 1950s and is narrated via a younger guy named Holden Caulfield. Holden is not specific about his region even as he's telling the tale, but he makes it clean that he's present process treatment in an intellectual health facility or sanatorium. The activities he narrates take location inside the few days between the give-up of the fall school term and Christmas, whilst Holden is 16 years vintage. Holden's tale begins on the Saturday following the give-up of classes on the Pensy Prep faculty in Agerstown, Pennsylvania. Pensy is Holden's fourth faculty. He has already failed out of 3 others. At Pensy, he has failed 4 out of 5 of his lessons and has obtained notice that he's being expelled. However, he isn't always scheduled to return domestic to Big Apple till Wednesday. He visits his elderly records instructor, Spencer, to mention goodbye. However, whilst Spencer tries to reprimand him for his terrible educational performance, Holden becomes annoyed. Back inside the dormitory, Holden is similarly angry with the aid of his unhygienic neighbor, Ackley, and by his very own roommate, Stradlater. Stradlater spends the night on a date with Jane Gallagher, a girl whom Holden used so far, and whom he nevertheless admires. All through the route of the nighttime, Holden grows increasingly nervous about Stradlater's taking Jane out, and while Stradlater returns, Holden questions him insistently about whether he tried to have sex along with her. Stradlater teases Holden, who flies into a rage and assaults Stradlater. Stradlater pins Holden down and bloodies his nostril. Holden comes to a decision that he's had sufficient of Pensy and will go tonight 3 days early, live in a resort, and now not tell his parents that he's again. On the train to the Big Apple, Holden meets the mother of one of his fellow Pensy college students. Though he thinks the scholar is an entire bastard, he tells the woman made-up stories about how shy her son is and the way well-respected he is at college. While he arrives at Penn Station, he is going right into a telephone booth and considers calling several people. However, for diverse reasons he comes to a decision against it. He gets in a cab and asks the cab driver wherein the ducks in Central Park cross, whilst the lagoon freezes, but his question annoys the driver. Holden has the cab driver take him to the Egmont Inn, wherein he checks himself in. From his room at the Egmont, Holden can see into the rooms of a number of the visitors in the opposite wing. He observes a man putting on silk stockings, high heels, a bra, a corset, and an evening robe. He additionally sees a man and a female in every other room taking turns spitting mouthfuls of their beverages into each different's faces and giggling hysterically. He translates the couple's behavior as a form of sexual play and is both upset and aroused via it. After smoking multiple cigarettes, he calls Religion Cavendish, a lady he has never met, but whose variety he were given from an acquaintance at Princeton. Holden thinks he remembers hearing that she was once a stripper, and he believes he can convince her to have intercourse with him. He calls her, and even though she is at first irritated to be referred to as at this kind of overdue hour through an entire stranger, she subsequently indicates that they meet tomorrow. Holden doesn't want to wait that lengthy and finishes up striking up without arranging of assembly. Holden is going downstairs to the lavender room and sits at a desk, but the waiter realizes he's a minor and refuses to serve him. He flirts with 3 ladies in their 1930s who seem like they're from out of city and are generally inquisitive about catching a glimpse of a movie star. Nonetheless, Holden dances with them and feels that he's half in love with the blonde one after seeing how nicely she dances. After making a few wisecracks approximately his age, they go away, letting him pay their complete tab. As Holden goes out to the lobby, he begins to consider Jane Gallagher and, in a flashback, recounts how he got to recognize her. They met while spending a summer season vacation in Maine, performed golf and checkers, and held hands on the films. One afternoon, during a recreation of checkers, her stepfather got here onto the porch, where they had been gambling, and when he left Jane commenced to cry. Holden had moved to sit down beside her and kissed her throughout her face, however she wouldn't let him kiss her at the mouth. That changed into the nearest they came to necking. Holden leaves the Egmont and takes a cab to Ernie's Jazz Club in Greenwich Village. Once more, he asks the cab driver where the geese insignificant park cross inside the wintry weather, and this cabbie is even extra irritable than the primary one. Holden sits by myself at a desk in Ernie's and observes the opposite customers with distaste. He runs into Lillian Simmons, one in every of his older brother's former girlfriends, who invites him to take a seat together with her and her date. Holden says he has to satisfy someone, leaves, and walks again to the Egmont. Maurice, the elevator operator at the Egmont, offers to send a prostitute to Holden's room for $5, and Holden agrees. A younger woman, identifying herself as Sunny, arrives at his door. She pulls off her get dressed, but Holden starts off able to feel extraordinary and attempts to make conversation along with her. He claims that he lately underwent a spinal operation and isn't sufficiently recovered to have sex together with her, but he gives to pay her anyway. She sits on his lap and talks dirty to him, however he insists on paying her 5 greenbacks and showing her the door. Sunny returns with Maurice, who needs any other $5 from Holden. While Holden refuses to pay, Maurice punches him in the stomach and leaves him on the ground whilst Sunny takes $5 from his pockets. Holden is going to bed. He wakes up at 10 o'clock on Sunday and calls Sally Hayes, an attractive woman whom he has dated within the past. They arrange to meet for a matinee showing of a Broadway play. He eats breakfast at a sandwich bar, wherein he converses with 2 nuns approximately Romeo and Juliet. He gives the nuns 10 greenbacks. He attempts to cell phone Jane Gallagher, but her mom solutions the cell phone, and he hangs up. He's taking a cab to Principal Park to search for his younger sister, Phoebe, but she isn't there. He allows one of Phoebe's schoolmates tighten her skate, and the girl tells him that Phoebe might be inside the Museum of Herbal History. Although he is aware of that Phoebe's elegance wouldn't be on the museum on a Sunday, he goes there anyway, but when he gets there he makes a decision now not to go in, and as an alternative takes a cab to the Biltmore Hotel to fulfill Sally. Holden and Sally visit the play, and Holden is aggravated that Sally talks with a boy she is aware of from Andover in a while. At Sally's concept, they go to Radio Metropolis to ice skate. They each skate poorly and decide to get a table instead. Holden attempts to provide an explanation to Sally why he sat at college, and in reality, urges her to run away with him to Massachusetts or Vermont and stay in a cabin. While she refuses, he calls her a fake in the ass and laughs at her, while she reacts angrily. She refuses to pay attention to his apologies and leaves. Holden calls Jane again, but there's no solution. He calls Carl Luce, a younger guy who were Holden's pupil consultant at the Wooten School and who's now a student at Columbia College. Luce arranges to satisfy him for a drink after dinner, and Holden is going to a film at Radio Metropolis to kill time. Holden and Luce meet at the Wicker Bar within the Seton Motel. At Wooten, Luce had spoken frankly with some of the boys approximately 6, and Holden attempts to attract him right into a communique approximately at yet again. Luce grows irritated with the aid of Holden's juvenile feedback about homosexuals and about Luce's Chinese language lady friend, and he makes an excuse to go away early. Holden continues to drink scotch and pay attention to the pianist and singer. Pretty inebriated, Holden telephones Sally Hayes and babbles about their Christmas Eve plans. Then he is going to the lagoon in Central Park, where he used to look at the ducks as an infant. It takes him a long time to discover it, and by the time he does, he is freezing cold. He then comes to a decision to sneak into his very own rental building and wake his sister, Phoebe. He is pressured to admit to Phoebe that he turned into kicked out of faculty, which makes her mad at him. While he tries to provide an explanation for why he hates faculty, she accuses him of now not liking whatever. He tells her his fable of being the catcher inside the Rye, a person who catches little kids as they're about to fall off of a cliff. Phoebe tells him that he has misremembered the poem that he took the photograph from. Robert Burns' poem says, "If a body meet a frame, coming through the Rye, no longer catch a frame." Holden calls his former English teacher, Mr. Antolini, who tells Holden he can come to his condominium. Mr. Antolini asks Holden approximately his expulsion and tries to recommend him about his destiny. Holden can't conceal his sleepiness, and Mr. Antolini puts him to bed on the couch. Holden awakens to find Mr. Antolini stroking his brow. Questioning that Mr. Antolini is creating a homosexual overture, Holden rapidly excuses himself and leaves, drowsing for some hours on a bench at Grand Primary Station. Holden is going to Phoebe's school and sends her a observe announcing that he is leaving domestic for right and that she need to meet him at lunchtime at the museum. Whilst Phoebe arrives, she is wearing a suitcase full of clothes and he or she asks Holden to take her with him. He refuses angrily and she or he cries and then refuses to talk to him. Knowing she can follow him, he walks to the zoo and then takes her across the park to a carousel. He buys her a prize ticket and watches her trip it. It starts to rain closely, however Holden is so glad watching his sister journey the carousel that he is close to tears. Holden ends his narrative right here, telling the reader that he is not going to inform the tale of the way he went domestic and were given sick. He plans to visit a brand new college inside the fall and is cautiously positive about his future.